Kemi first saw him at her cousin's wedding, seated at the high table, his agbada pressed like it was carved from silk. The chains around his wrist glinted in the sun, but it was the way people moved around him, with fear disguised as respect, that caught her eye. They called him Chief Lady. A Lagos business tycoon. Owner of land, transport lines, and silence. He watched her the whole evening. Not like a man pursuing love, but like someone choosing furniture. "I heard he asked of you," her cousin whispered breathlessly later. "A man like that? You won't suffer again. At all." But Kemi had always trusted her instincts more than people's praises. And her instincts didn't smile. Still, when he invited her to dinner, her mother nearly danced out of her wrapper. "Kemi. This is the kind of breakthrough we fast and pray for. No delay. Oh. You're not getting younger." She went. Chief Lady's mansion in Banana Island looked more like a palace from an old Nollywood film. Too perfect. Too polished. Too quiet. At dinner, he spoke little. Just watched her. Smiling. Like a man who already owned what he was eating. "You have the spirit of a queen," he finally said, voice deep like distant thunder. "I want to protect you." By the end of the week, he sent a driver to pick her up for lunch. Then a stylist to take her measurements. Then 2 iPhones, 3 handbags, and a note that simply read, "Say yes. You'll never cry again." The gifts came daily, as did the pressure. She asked around. Everyone had only good things to say. Rich. Generous. Powerful. So why did her skin crawl whenever he touched her shoulder? The night he proposed, she smiled in front of family. But when she hugged him, she heard it. A whisper. Close to her ear. It wasn't his voice. And it wasn't a blessing. Some whispers are not meant to be heard by the living, but she heard them anyway. The sound was faint, almost like a breath. Yet it froze her blood. At first, Kemi thought it was her imagination. Maybe the pressure of the evening, her family cheering, the lights flashing from endless photos, the gold ring heavy on her finger, was playing tricks on her mind. But as he pulled her in again for a longer embrace, she heard it clearer this time. A woman's voice. Soft. Strained. Terrified. "Don't sleep. Don't trust him." She jerked back quickly, forcing a smile. Chief Lady looked at her. Not with confusion, but with expectation. As though he knew she'd heard it. As though he wanted her to. "You're overwhelmed," he said, brushing her cheek with his large palm. "It happens. But you'll get used to it. You're mine now." That night, her mother held her and cried with joy. "My daughter has entered the League of Queens," she said, over and over. "This is the kind of man women fight for." Kemi didn't sleep. The mansion he brought her to after the engagement was as beautiful as a magazine spread. A grand staircase curved into the ceiling. Paintings watched her from every wall. A maid, silent and expressionless, led her to her room. It wasn't the master bedroom. "This is your room," the maid said flatly. "He doesn't like being disturbed at night." Kemi stared at her. "But we're engaged." "Shouldn't." The maid didn't answer. She simply turned and walked away like she was gliding. At midnight, Kemi heard footsteps outside her door. Heavy, slow. Then the faint sound of metal dragging across tiles. She sat up, heart pounding. Then silence. She rose slowly and tiptoed to the door. She pressed her ear against it. Nothing. She turned the lock carefully and peeked out into the hallway. But the painting on the wall across from her door was upside down. And beneath it, on the floor, was a white scarf. Torn, with a single drop of blood on the edge. Kemi shut her door and locked it 3 times. That night, she heard the whisper again. Dig under the 3rd tile. In some houses, silence is not peace, it's a warning. Kemi didn't sleep again. She lay stiff on the unfamiliar mattress, eyes locked on the ceiling, the whisper echoing in her ears, "Dig, under the third tile." What tile? Where? The room was spacious but cold, like it had never been touched by sunlight. Everything inside looked expensive, but lifeless, like furniture made for display, not for comfort. In the morning, a knock came at the door. Before she could answer, the door opened slowly. The same maid from the night before entered with a tray. Breakfast. Yam and eggs. Pineapple juice. Everything arranged perfectly. "You don't knock before entering?" Kemi asked, trying to sound firm. The maid just stared at her for a second too long. Then whispered, "Sorry, Ma," and turned to leave. Kemi noticed it then. The maid was barefoot. Her toenails were chipped, and there was something wrapped around her ankle, thin red thread. It looked ceremonial. Ritualistic. "Wait," Kemi called out. "What's your name?" The maid paused. Her lips moved as if to answer, but then she seemed to change her mind. "I don't remember." She closed the door behind her. Kemi's heart thundered. Later that day, Chief Lady returned. He took her shopping. Designer stores. Gold jewelry. Perfumes from Europe. Everyone they passed greeted him with a strange mix of respect and fear. He held her waist tightly in public, smiling like a man in love. But every time his hand touched her skin, Kemi felt a cold ripple beneath the surface. That night, while he went to his separate room, she returned to hers. She waited. When the house was silent again, no footsteps, no dragging sounds, she stepped onto the cold marble floor and examined it. She found it. In the corner behind the wardrobe. The third tile had a faint crack. She dug with a spoon. Then with her bare hands. Her fingers bled, but she didn't stop. And when the tile finally loosened and lifted, the smell hit her first. Rot. Damp. Earth. Inside the small space beneath was a box. Wrapped in cloth. Stained. She pulled it out, her hands trembling. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Each one of a different woman. And every woman was wearing the same white scarf. Some smiled. Some looked afraid. And in the last photo, was Kemi. Wearing the same scarf. But the background wasn't familiar. It was a forest. And her eyes in the photo were closed. There are photos the living should never see, because they were never meant to exist. Kemi dropped the box as if it had burned her fingers. The photos scattered across the floor like cursed leaves, each one heavier than the last. Her own image stared up at her, still, peaceful, and lifeless. She backed away slowly, her heart thudding like thunder in her ears. "How?" she whispered. "When? I never posed for this." The scarf in the photo, that white scarf, was identical to the one she found outside her door last night. Her breaths came shallow. She gathered the photos back into the box with trembling hands and shoved it under her bed. She had to leave. Immediately. But as she turned to grab her phone from the bedside table, it vibrated with a message. "Don't run. I'm watching. Dinner at 8. Wear red." The screen went black. She stared at it, the room suddenly feeling smaller, colder. At 8 p.m. sharp, the driver appeared outside her door. She didn't remember telling anyone where her room was. She dressed as instructed. A red gown hung in her closet, brand new, tagged, her exact size. She hadn't bought it. The dining hall downstairs looked like a royal banquet. 3 servants stood by the wall. Chief Lady sat at the head of the long table, sipping wine, expression unreadable. "You look divine," he said, motioning for her to sit. She obeyed, legs weak beneath her. "Do you believe in destiny?" he asked as she Saturday. "Some people are born to shine. Others, to serve a greater purpose." Kemi forced a smile. "What purpose is that?" He raised his glass and said nothing. She didn't eat. just stared at the food. Every bite looked delicious, but felt like a silent threat. Halfway through the meal, he said quietly, "You remind me of Adizwa." "Who's Adizwa?" she asked. He paused, fork midair. A woman who didn't listen. There was a sharp clang as the maid across the room dropped a plate. The moment froze. Chief Lady's eyes didn't move from Kemi. He smiled again, slow and hollow. Kemi barely made it through the meal. As she got up to leave, he held her wrist gently and leaned in. "I hope you're settling in well," he whispered. "The house has history." Back in her room, Kemi locked the door and fell to the floor. She couldn't stay. But she couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until she found out who Adizwa was. And why Chief Lady spoke of her like a warning. She sat by the window, watching the moon cast uneasy shadows across the compound. Every creak of the house, every shift of wind, sounded like a voice trying to break through the silence. By dawn, she had made up her mind. She needed answers. About Adizwa. About the other women. About why her picture was already buried beneath a tile like she was a memory waiting to be erased. After breakfast, when Chief Lady left in his convoy of black SUVs, she wandered the house with purpose, pretending to admire the decor, pretending to be the sweet fiancée. She moved past locked doors. Some too ornate, others too plain. Then she reached the end of a narrow hallway on the second floor, one she hadn't noticed before. There was only one door. Wooden. Old. Unlike the others. She turned the knob. Locked. But someone behind her whispered, "That room belongs to her." Kemi jumped. It was the maid again. Same red thread around her ankle. Same hollow eyes. "Adizwa?" Kemi asked cautiously. The maid nodded slowly, her voice a breath. "They say she ran away. But no one ever saw her leave. She was like you, too curious." "What happened to her?" The maid's eyes flicked toward the hallway camera. "I shouldn't talk." But before Kemi could beg further, the maid pressed a tiny key into her palm. Then walked away without a word. Kemi waited until nightfall. When the house fell into its usual stillness, she tiptoed back to the door. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared it would wake the house. She inserted the key. It fit. The door opened with a low creak. A wave of cold air met her face, thick with dust and something else, something forgotten. Inside, the room was untouched. A vanity stood against the wall, covered in a thin sheet. Clothes hung in the wardrobe. Shoes were lined up as if waiting to be worn again. And on the bed, neatly folded, was another white scarf. This one had a name stitched at the corner, Adizwa. Kemi's hand shook. Then she saw the mirror. Cracked. Blackened in places. But etched on the glass, faintly, were words. She leaned closer. Her breath caught as the message revealed itself. "He feeds on our silence." Kemi stumbled back. And in the reflection, behind her, a woman stood. Eyes hollow. Lips sealed with thread. Wearing the same white scarf. There's nothing more terrifying than a ghost who can't speak, only warn. Kemi's scream never left her throat. She spun around instantly, but the room was empty. No woman. No sound. Nothing but the eerie whisper of the wind creeping through the half-open window. But in the mirror, the woman had been there. Pale. Hollow. Her lips sewn shut with black thread. Not metaphorically, physically. As though someone wanted to silence her forever. Kemi backed away from the mirror, her chest rising and falling like waves during a storm. Her hand clutched the edge of the vanity for support. She tried to steady her breathing. Logic told her she was imagining things. But the fear in her bones told a different story. She looked down and saw something tucked between the vanity and the wall. A leather-bound book. A diary. She pulled it out carefully and opened to the first page. My name is Adizwa Adebayo. If you're reading this, I pray you're braver than I was. Kemi sat on the edge of the bed and turned the pages slowly, afraid of what she'd find. Chief Lady is not a man, not completely. He takes women who no one will look for. Makes them feel like queens. Then strips them down, piece by piece, feeding on their will, their light, their voices. Kemi blinked. Not completely a man? What did that mean? We don't die quickly. We fade. He drains us. Until we forget our names. Our reasons. Our strength. And when we finally vanish, we end up in the mirror. Watching. Waiting. The next few pages were smudged. Some ink blurred by water, or tears. Then one entry stopped her heart. I tried to run. Twice. Each time, he found me. The third time. I stopped speaking. I thought silence would protect me. But it only made me easier to keep. Kemi dropped the diary as the lights in the room flickered. The air turned colder. She moved to leave, but just as she reached for the door, she saw it, the reflection in the mirror again. Adizwa. But this time, she wasn't alone. 2 other women stood beside her. One held a baby in her arms. The other had no face. Just a blur, like someone erased her identity. And then, one by one, they raised their hands and pointed. Not at Kemi. But behind her. She turned slowly. And for a second, just a split, heart-shattering second, she saw a shadow. Not standing. But crouched on the ceiling. Watching her. Then it vanished. The moment you realize you're being hunted is never the beginning, it's already too late. Kemi didn't remember how she got back to her room. Her legs carried her like they had a mind of their own, moving through the dark halls, past ancient portraits that now seemed to be watching her. By the time she locked her door, her hands were shaking so violently she dropped the key twice. She collapsed onto the floor, her back pressed against the door, eyes wide and unblinking. What was that? It wasn't just the image in the mirror. It wasn't just the diary. It was that thing on the ceiling. The crouched figure with long limbs and glowing eyes. It had no face, just the outline of a man-shaped shadow. And she had felt it. Watching. Breathing. Waiting. The house wasn't just haunted. It was alive. Feeding. The whisper came again, soft as breath against her skin. You must bury the scarf, before he does. Kemi's head whipped around. No one was there. But the scarf, that cursed white scarf with Adizwa stitched into it, was now on her bed. She hadn't brought it back from the room. She hadn't even touched it. Her mind spun. Maybe this was what he did. Maybe this was how the others disappeared. Not all at once, but slowly, losing pieces of themselves until they simply faded. She stared at the scarf. Then grabbed it with a cloth and stuffed it into a drawer. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the door with the lights on, holding the diary like a weapon. As if Adizwa's words could shield her from what lurked in the shadows. In the morning, there was a knock on her door. Kemi, came Chief Lady's deep voice. Open the door, my dear. She froze. He had never come to her room before. I have something to show you, he said, softer now. Something important. She didn't answer. Kemi, he repeated, almost lovingly. Don't forget who brought you here. Who saved you from that tiny life. Still, she didn't respond. A few seconds passed. Then he chuckled. The sound was calm. Too calm. I see, he said. Well, perhaps you'll feel more cooperative after dinner. His footsteps faded. Kemi waited 5 full minutes before peeling herself off the floor. She had to get out. But not just to save herself. She had to expose whatever Chief Lady was. Whoever he used to be. Because no ordinary man could make women disappear without blood, without screams, without trace. And the worst part? She was starting to forget what her own voice sounded like. The more she uncovered, the more the house tried to silence her. Kemi woke up the next morning with blood on her fingertips. She hadn't cut herself. She hadn't slept, either, at least not willingly. She remembered sitting on the floor, reading Adizwa's diary again, her eyes fighting exhaustion. Then, nothing. Just darkness. Then waking up, slumped by the bed, her nails caked with dry blood. She checked herself. No wounds. But there were scratches on the floorboards. Long, desperate. Like claw marks. She backed away slowly. This house, this prison, was trying to bend her. Twist her into one of them. The quiet, obedient girls in the photos. The ones who smiled just before they disappeared. That day, she avoided Chief Lady completely. She stayed in her room, pretended to be unwell, and refused meals. The maid came twice to knock and deliver food. She never looked up. Kemi wanted to talk to her. Beg her to explain what the red thread meant. Ask how long she'd been here. Ask who the faceless girl in the mirror was. But the maid had stopped speaking entirely. Her lips were stitched. Not with thread. Not physically. But metaphorically, like her voice had been locked away somewhere she could no longer reach. By late afternoon, Kemi made a decision. She needed help. She tried her phone. No network. She used the mansion's landline in the hallway. Dead. Then she remembered, her cousin, Chioma. The wedding. That was where she met Lady. She snuck into the study and found a laptop. Thank God for email. Her fingers typed rapidly. Help me, Chioma, it's Kemi. Please, if you get this, don't reply. Just come. Something is wrong. He's not who you think. I found photos. A diary. I'm not safe. Banana Island Mansion. Please, Chioma. Just come. She clicked send. The connection blinked. Then failed. She tried again. And convection failed. Suddenly, the screen turned black. Then a reflection appeared, hers. And behind her. Chief Lady. She turned instantly. No one was there. She turned back to the screen. Just the desktop again. But the email draft was gone. Deleted. Completely. She shut the laptop and turned to leave, and there he was. In the doorway. Smiling. I hope you're not trying to run away, Kemi, he said, voice low and calm. Because if you are, there's something you should see first. Evil doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers calmly and dares you to disobey. Kemi's throat went dry. Chief Lady stood at the door like a man who owned the world, and everything inside it. His agbada flowed around him like shadows stitched into fabric, his eyes calm, too calm. I see you found your way around the house, he said, stepping into the study. Kemi forced a smile, her hands behind her back to hide their trembling. I was just checking my email. Thought I'd reach out to a friend. He hummed, stopping just inches from her. You didn't find the network strong, did you? She shook her head. He smiled wider. Yes. This house has its own rules. Outside connections tend to fail. Her heart pounded. Come, he said suddenly. There's something I want to show you. Kemi didn't move. His voice sharpened, just slightly. Now, Kemi. She followed. Downstairs. Through a hallway she hadn't noticed before. Long, narrow. Lit with oil lamps, not electricity. The air smelled of dust and palm oil. At the end was a wooden door with carvings, old Yoruba symbols of protection, sacrifice, and silence. He opened it. A staircase led underground. Cold, stale air rushed out like a secret that had been buried too long. Kemi hesitated. You said you wanted to understand me, he murmured. Here's your chance. She descended. The staircase opened into a dimly lit room, stone walls, candles flickering along the edges. In the center, a shrine. Atop it, photos of women, smiling, beautiful, frozen in time. Every woman wore a white scarf. Kemi's knees nearly gave out. He walked to the shrine, touched one of the photos gently. Do you know what the world does to powerful men like me? He asked. They use you, praise you, then envy you. I needed something more. Something eternal. He turned to her. You. I made a pact. With the river. With something older than time. In exchange, I offer beauty. Spirit. Voice. Kemi shook her head slowly. You kill them. No, he said, smiling. I preserve them. Their essence gives me strength. Their silence feeds me. She stepped back. There's only one rule, he said softly. They must offer it willingly. Their silence. Their surrender. If they resist, like a Dizwa, they suffer. Kemi's voice came out hoarse. What if I don't surrender? He looked almost amused. Then I wait. Until you forget who you are. And you will, Kemi. They all do. She ran. She didn't wait to hear more. She sprinted back up the stairs, through the corridor, ignoring his voice echoing behind her. Kemi, you'll be back. The house always brings them back. She didn't stop. Not even when she passed the maid, who now stood completely still, tears running silently down her face. Not even when she saw her reflection in the hallway mirror, her eyes looking strange, distant, not quite hers anymore. She locked herself in her room and fell to the ground. And for the first time, she cried. Not just from fear. But because part of her believed him. Because in the silence, she could already feel something slipping away. When your voice is all you have left, losing it feels like dying slowly. From the inside.